My dad spent 43 years building his bakery with flour-dusted hands and 4 a.m. wake-up calls, and he left it to me. But my brother told everyone I didn't deserve it, that I was just the quiet one who never showed up. So I let him believe that, right up until my firm's forensic audit software pulled 12 years of his financial records, and the DA asked him if he had anything to say before she filed charges. This is where the story really starts. Stay with me, because you will not see this ending coming. My father, Ron, wasn't a complicated man. He liked black coffee, country music, and the smell of bread in the morning. He had built Hargrove's Bakery from a single rented storefront in Clarksville, Tennessee, into a 3-location operation that employed 22 people, most of them neighbors, some of them family. He was proud of it, the way only a man who built something from nothing can be proud. He used to say the bakery wasn't just a business. It was proof that we were here, that we mattered, that the Hargrove name meant something on this street. I grew up behind that counter. I learned to count change before I learned to ride a bike. My father taught me the books when I was 14, sitting at the small desk in the back office with the ancient adding machine and the green ledger he never once switched to digital. Numbers are honest, Rach, he told me. They don't lie. People lie. Numbers just show you what people did. It was that lesson that sent me into forensic accounting. I wasn't the flashy one. That was my brother, Derek. Derek was the golden son, the firstborn, the one who shook hands at every Chamber of Commerce dinner and knew every customer by name. He was charming the way a salesman is charming, enthusiastic, warm, and always subtly selling something. My father loved him the way fathers love sons who remind them of their younger, more confident selves. I was the one in the back, checking the invoices against the receipts, noticing when the sugar supplier's numbers didn't add up. My father loved me the way fathers love daughters who remind them of themselves, just the quieter version they never let the world see. My younger sister, Brianna, floated somewhere in between. She was sweet, scattered, and adored by both my father and my brother in ways that made her easy to influence. She was 24, working part-time at a spa, and had no interest in the bakery except as a place to pick up free muffins on Sundays. My father had a stroke 18 months ago. He recovered most of his speech, but his right side remained weak, and his short-term memory became unreliable. He still knew us. He still knew the bakery, but he tired easily, and the day-to-day operations became too much. That was when my brother stepped in. Derek volunteered to manage the 3 locations, while my father recovered. My father was grateful. We all were. I offered to handle the financials remotely. I lived 4 hours away in Nashville, working for a mid-sized firm that specialized in financial investigations for corporate clients. Derek waved me off. "I've got it, Rach. You do your fancy city job. I'll take care of Dad." I should have pushed harder. I know that now. My father died 8 months later, quietly, in his own bed, on a Tuesday morning in March. I drove down that same day, the highway blurring through my windshield while I tried to remember how to breathe. The funeral was crowded. Half of Clarksville showed up. 3 of the bakery employees cried harder than any of us. My brother stood at the door in a dark suit, receiving handshakes, looking every inch the grieving and responsible eldest son. I sat in the 3rd row and held my father's favorite recipe book in my lap, the one he'd handwritten himself, the one he'd told me to keep safe the last time I'd visited him. The will reading was 2 weeks later. My father had been methodical about it, which did not surprise me. The lawyer, a careful older man named Mr. Phipps, read through the document in a quiet office that smelled of old paper. The house went to all 3 of us equally. His personal accounts, modest and clearly stated, split 3 ways. And then Mr. Phipps paused, adjusted his glasses, and read the part that changed everything. The bakery, all 3 locations, the equipment, the brand, the lease agreements, and the business accounts was left in its entirety to me. 2. Rachel Hargrove, his youngest daughter, his little accountant, as he had written in a handwritten addendum attached to the will. She knows what it's worth. She knows what it cost. Trust her with it. The room went very still. My brother's jaw tightened. His wife, Patrice, who had positioned herself in the chair directly beside him, reached over and gripped his arm. Brianna looked at me with wide, uncertain eyes, waiting to see how I would react, the way she always did. taking her emotional cues from whoever seemed most sure of themselves in the room. I didn't react. I just sat with my hands folded in my lap and let the words settle. Mr. Phipps finished. There were no questions, technically, but as we gathered our things to leave, my brother stopped at the door and turned. His voice was controlled, but only just. "Rachel doesn't run a bakery," he said. "She runs spreadsheets in an office 4 hours away." Dad loved her, but this makes no sense. He must have been confused. You know how he'd been lately. Mr. Phipps looked up from his papers. "Mr. Hargrove, your father was quite lucid when he executed this will. He came in person, 14 months ago. He was clear and specific." My brother nodded slowly, the way people nod when they are not agreeing, but are choosing to wait. "I'll call you," he said to me. And he walked out. He called me the next morning. Patrice was on the line too, which I hadn't expected but also wasn't surprised by. Patrice had always treated the bakery the way certain people treat things they haven't earned, and therefore can't quite believe they don't own. She had decorating opinions about the second location. She had told my father once that the logo needed to be modernized. She spoke about the Hargrove name with proprietary ease. "Rachel," my brother said, "we need to talk about this realistically. You cannot run 3 bakery locations from Nashville. It's not logical. The staff knows me. The suppliers know me. I've been here every day for the past 8 months. I understand that," I said. "We can work out a transition plan. I'm planning to relocate." There was a pause. "Relocate?" He repeated it like I'd said something absurd. "You're going to give up your career?" "I'm going to run the business my father left me." "Rachel." His voice dropped into the register he used when he was about to be reasonable at me. "Dad was sick. He wasn't thinking clearly about the practicalities. He loved you. We all know that. But leaving you the entire business instead of splitting it equally was not a sound decision. I've already spoken to a lawyer. We think the will should be contested on grounds of," he paused, choosing his word carefully, "diminished capacity." There it was. I had wondered how long it would take. "Dad was not diminished," I said quietly. "He was forgetting things, Rachel. He was confused some days. We all saw it. He remembered exactly what he wanted to do with the thing he spent his whole life building," I said. "He just didn't want you to do it." Patrice made a sound on the line, a short, sharp intake of breath, the sound of someone who is angry but has been told to stay quiet. My brother's voice went cold. "You've always thought you were smarter than everyone else. That little accountant routine." "Dad bought it. We don't have to." He hung up. I sat in my childhood bedroom, the one my father had kept exactly as I'd left it when I moved to Nashville, and I looked at the wall where he'd tacked up the blue ribbon I'd won at a state math competition when I was 15. He'd kept it there for 17 years. My brother thought I was going to crumble. He had always mistaken my quietness for weakness, my precision for timidity. He had spent his entire life in rooms where volume and confidence were the currency, and he had decided, somewhere along the way, that I had nothing valuable to spend. He had forgotten what I did for a living. He had forgotten that I had been asking to see the books for 8 months, and he had told me it was under control. That was the thought that started everything, not the threat of the will contest, not the condescension in his voice. It was the simple, delayed recognition that I had been asking to see the bakery's financials for months, and my brother had, every single time, found a reason to redirect me. I called my firm's managing partner the next morning and told her I was taking family leave. Then I drove to Clarksville. My brother met me at the main location with a locksmith. "I'm sorry," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "But until this is sorted legally, I don't think it's appropriate for you to have access to the business premises. I'm protecting the assets." "You don't have legal authority to do that," I said. "My lawyer disagrees." I looked at the locksmith, a teenager who clearly wished he were anywhere else, and then I looked at my brother. I had my phone in my hand. I opened the camera and began recording the exterior of the bakery, the new lock being installed, my brother's face. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Documenting," I said. "Same thing I always do." I went directly from the bakery to a local attorney recommended by Mr. Phipps, a woman named Claire Easton, who had handled estate litigation for 20 years and who looked at the situation with the calm assessment of someone who had seen this exact play before. "He's locked you out of your own property," she confirmed. "We can get an emergency injunction. Give me 24 hours. She got it in 18. I was back inside the bakery by the following afternoon. What I found in the office files was the first signal. Not the smoking gun that would come later, but the first crack of light under the door. The operating accounts showed regular, healthy revenue. The supplier invoices were current. On the surface, everything looked managed. But I am a forensic accountant. I don't look at the surface. I looked at the payroll records first. Force of habit. Employee hours were logged correctly. Wages were paid on time. Nothing alarming. Then I looked at the vendor payments, and I found a line item I didn't recognize. A monthly consulting fee, $2,200, paid to something called Hargrove Advisory Group. Every month for the past 8 months, I searched the business registration. Hargrove Advisory Group was an LLC registered in Tennessee 6 weeks after my father's stroke. Its registered agent was Patrice. I printed the page and set it in the center of the desk, with the careful, specific calm of someone who has just found the first piece of a very large puzzle. I called Claire. "I think we need to look at a lot more than the will." She was quiet for a moment. "How much more?" "I want subpoenas for every account my father held or co-held in the last 10 years. Every account my brother had signature authority on, and I want the records for Hargrove Advisory Group going back to its founding." Claire's voice changed, the way the voice of a sharp person changes when they understand they are standing at the edge of something significant. "Rachel, was your brother on any of your father's personal accounts?" "He was added to the primary checking account last spring," I said, "to help manage bills while Dad was recovering." She exhaled slowly. "I'll file tomorrow." My brother's lawyer, a man named Gary Whitman, filed 3 separate motions to block the subpoenas within the week. He called them an invasive fishing expedition designed to harass and defame his client in the midst of a grief-stricken family dispute. The judge, a methodical woman who read every word submitted to her court, denied all 3. "The petitioner has placed the decedent's mental state and financial decision-making directly at issue," she ruled. "The respondent has a clear right to examine the relevant financial history." I got the first batch of records on a Thursday afternoon, forwarded to my laptop in my father's back office, where he used to drink his black coffee and do the books by hand. The checking account was the start. For the 8 months my brother had been on it, the normal household and bakery-related debits were all present. Utilities, medical copays, grocery deliveries, all of it logged and mundane. But there was also a monthly transfer of $1,500 to an account I didn't recognize. Clean, consistent, on the same date every month, labeled simply as MGMT fee. I traced the destination account. It took me 2 days and a call to our firm's banking contact. The account was a personal savings account held jointly by my brother and Patrice. $1,500 a month for 8 months. $12,000, taken from my father's personal account while he was ill and labeled as a management fee, paid to the people doing the managing. But that wasn't the full number. Not even close. The deeper records arrived on a Monday. I had been staying in my father's house, sleeping in the guest room, eating cereal for dinner, and spending my evenings going line by line through 10 years of statements. My eyes were tired. My coffee had gone cold twice. And then I found it. 3 years ago, my father had held a diversified investment portfolio, nothing extravagant, but careful and steady, the kind of portfolio a man builds quietly over a lifetime of getting up at 4 in the morning. Blue chips, a handful of index funds, a modest bond allocation, total value at its peak, just over $400,000. Current value, $41,000. I stared at the screen for a long time. The liquidations had happened in stages. The first sale was 2.5 years ago, 6 months before my father's stroke. $110,000 in equities sold in a single transaction. The proceeds had been moved to a joint account I'd never seen listed in the estate documents, an account where my brother was the co-signer. The second liquidation was 14 months ago, 3 months after the stroke, while my father was in rehabilitation. Another $90,000, same destination. The third was 8 months ago, 2 months before my father died. The remainder, minus the $41,000 still sitting there like a leftover, moved to the same account. I sat back in my father's chair, I could smell the faint trace of his coffee in the air, or maybe I was imagining it. I pressed my hands flat on the desk to stop them from shaking. I knew what this was. I had seen it before, in corporate cases, in client investigations, in the dry language of audit reports. It had a formal name: financial elder abuse, the systematic exploitation of a vulnerable person's assets by someone in a position of trust. But this wasn't a client. This was my father. And the man who had done it had stood at his funeral and shaken everyone's hands. I sent everything to Claire that night with a message that said simply, "We need to talk first thing tomorrow. This is bigger than the will." The mandatory mediation was held in a beige conference room with bad lighting and a mediator who introduced himself as Paul and looked like he had mediated too many of these and expected nothing good from this one. My brother arrived in a blazer. Patrice was with him, seated slightly behind him, the way a person sits when they want to appear supportive, but are actually orchestrating. Gary Whitman sat beside them with the practiced ease of a man who charged $400 an hour and felt comfortable with it. Claire and I sat on the other side. I had a binder in front of me, tabbed and labeled. Mr. Whitman opened with the offer. It was the same play: buyout of Rachel's interest in the bakery, a generous valuation, clean break, family peace. He delivered it with a smile that suggested we should be grateful. Claire didn't return the smile. She looked at my brother. "We are not here to discuss a buyout. We are here to inform you that we will be proceeding to trial on the will contest, that we will be countersuing for all legal fees and punitive damages for the frivolous nature of this petition, and that we have referred a separate matter to the district attorney's office." My brother's expression didn't move. Patrice's did. A small, involuntary tightening around her eyes. "Separate matter," Gary repeated flatly. "Yes." Claire opened her binder. "Perhaps you'd like to explain," she said to my brother, "the nature of Hargrove Advisory Group and the $2,200 monthly consulting fee paid from the bakery operating account to a company owned by your wife." Gary put a hand on my brother's arm before he could speak. "That is a legitimate management arrangement. Your father never agreed to it in writing," Claire said. "We have reviewed every document in the business files. There is no management contract, no board resolution, no record of your father ever approving this arrangement. It was created while he was in stroke recovery and unable to review business decisions. He was aware," my brother said. His voice was steady, but something behind it had gone tight. I spoke for the first time. I slid the first set of papers across the table. "These are the investment account statements," I said. "The portfolio Dad spent 30 years building. I would like you to explain what happened to $359,000. Patrice looked at the papers. Her hand went to the table edge. My brother looked at me. "That was strategic repositioning," he said. "Dad and I discussed reinvesting. He wanted the money working harder." I slid the second set of papers across. "And these are the statements for the account the money was moved to. The one with your name on it. The one that isn't listed anywhere in the estate documents." The room went very quiet. Gary leaned over and looked at the papers. His expression changed in a way that told me he hadn't known. His client hadn't told him. "That was information I filed away. This is a mischaracterization," Gary said. But there was no warmth in it now, just reflex. The account received 3 separate transfers, totaling $359,000 from our father's investment portfolio over a period of 2.5 years, I said. The first transfer began 6 months before his stroke. The subsequent transfers occurred while he was ill and in your care. The account is jointly held by you and Patrice. None of this money was disclosed to the estate. I am the executor of this estate. I had never heard of this account before I started pulling records. My brother pushed back from the table. "You're accusing me of stealing from my own father." "I'm reading you the bank statements," I said. "You can tell me what they mean." "What they mean," Claire said, "is that we have already provided this documentation to the Clarksville DA's office." She looked directly at my brother. "You filed a petition claiming your father lacked mental capacity. You opened that door. And what we found behind it is going to be very, very difficult to explain." My brother stood up. He looked at me with something in his face that I hadn't seen there before. Not anger, not contempt. Something closer to the look of a person who has just understood, finally, what they are standing on, and how thin the ice actually is. "We're done here," Gary said, standing. "Yes," I said. "You are." They left. Patrice walked out ahead of my brother without looking at either of us, her heels sharp on the floor. Paul, the mediator, gathered his notepad and quietly left the room without speaking to anyone. Claire closed her binder. "Rachel," she said, "when we go to trial, this is not going to look like a will dispute. It's going to look like what it is." "I know," I said. She looked at me carefully. "Are you ready for that?" "I've been ready since the first time he told me not to worry about the books." The week before the trial, my sister called me. She had been absent through most of this, the way Brianna was absent through most things that required a position not malicious, just adrift. She had texted me twice during the mediation aftermath, both times simple questions. "Is this really happening? And what does this mean for us?" I had answered as plainly as I could. Her voice on the phone was small. She was crying, or had been recently. "Rachel," she said. "Mom's friend," she meant my aunt. A family friend we had called that since childhood. She told me about the investment accounts. She said $350,000. "Is that real?" "Yes." "Where? How long has?" Her voice broke slightly. "Derek was doing this while Dad was sick." "The first transfer happened before Dad got sick," I said carefully. "So we don't fully know the timeline yet." She was silent for a long moment. I thought about telling her something comforting, but there was nothing comforting to say. The truth was what it was. "Did Patrice know?" Brianna asked. "The account is in her name, too," I said. Another silence. "I kept telling myself he was just handling things," Brianna said finally. "He always said he had it handled. He said you were too far away to understand how it worked." He said. She stopped. "What did he say about me?" She hesitated. "He said you thought you were too good for Clarksville, that you came down here with your firm and your degrees, and you just wanted to tear the family apart. He said the bakery should have been split 3 ways, and you were being greedy." I sat with that for a moment. The familiar shape of it. The way someone rewrites a story about you in order to make the people around you doubt you before you can say anything yourself. "Do you believe that?" I asked. She was quiet for long enough that I had my answer before she spoke. "No," she said softly. "No, I know you. I've always known you. I didn't want to see it." I said the thing I had to say next, even though it was hard. "Brianna, there's going to be a trial. Claire may need you to testify. Not about the money, you didn't know about that, but about Dad. About his state of mind. About the things you saw when you visited him and how he talked about the bakery and about me." She was quiet again. This time it felt different. Not hesitation, more like a person gathering something. "He talked about you all the time," she said finally. "The last time I saw him, he showed me a postcard you sent him from a conference in Chicago. He had it on the refrigerator. He said, 'That girl is going to do something with her life, and she's going to do it right.'" I pressed my hand over my eyes. "I'll testify," she said. "Whatever you need." The courtroom was small and matter-of-fact, the way probate courts tend to be. No gallery of onlookers, no dramatic vaulted ceilings. Just 2 tables, a judge's bench, overhead lights that hummed faintly, and the accumulated weight of what was about to happen. I sat with Claire at our table, our binders arranged in front of us in neat rows. My brother sat at the opposing table with Gary Whitman, who had clearly spent the past weeks reconsidering his career choices. Patrice was not present. She had, I'd learned, retained separate counsel. Brianna came in just before the session began. She sat in the chairs along the wall designated for witnesses and potential parties. My brother looked at her. She looked down at her hands. She did not look at him again. The judge, a man named Judge Calloway, who had the air of someone who had read everything submitted to him and found most of it predictable, opened the session and looked at my brother's table. "Mr. Whitman," he said, "I've reviewed the pre-trial submissions. I want to be straightforward with you before we begin. The petition to contest this will is resting on a claim of diminished capacity. Your evidence in support of that claim consists of 2 neighbor affidavits and a letter from a physician who saw the decedent twice and notes generalized cognitive fatigue. Against that, the respondent has produced the decedent's estate attorney, his primary care physician, and 13 months of handwritten correspondence, demonstrating coherent long-term planning and specific intent regarding this bequest. So before we spend the court's time on the petition itself, I would like to hear what you believe you can realistically establish. Gary Whitman adjusted his collar. Your Honor, we maintain that the decedent's reliance on one family member over others during a vulnerable period represents undue influence. Your father's estate attorney will testify that he came to his office in person and without your client present, Claire said, and demonstrated clear and specific intent. She placed a copy of the attorney's signed statement in front of the judge. He said, and I quote the attorney's notes here, Ron Hargrove knew exactly what he wanted. He had thought about it for years. He said, and this is verbatim from the attorney's notes, I want Rachel to have the bakery because she's the only one who won't sell it. The room was quiet. He said that to his lawyer, Judge Calloway asked. 14 months before he died, Claire confirmed, in a meeting attended only by himself and Mr. Phipps. No undue influence present, just a father who had made a clear and documented decision about his own legacy. My brother looked at the table, not at me, not at Gary, just at the wood grain of the table. Claire moved to the countersuit. Your Honor, we would now like to address what we believe was the actual motivation behind this petition. She began with Hargrove Advisory Group. She walked through the consulting fees, the absence of any written agreement, the fact that the bakery's operating account had been charged $2,200 monthly for 8 months for a company owned by the petitioner's spouse. She moved to the investment accounts. She had a chart, clean and clear, showing the portfolio value at its peak, the 3 liquidations, the destination accounts, and the timeline overlaid against my father's illness. $359,000, she said, moved from a vulnerable man's retirement savings into an account held by his son and daughter-in-law over a period of 2.5 years. None of it disclosed to the estate, none of it listed in any probate document. Gary Whitman objected 3 times in 60 seconds. Judge Calloway overruled all 3. He was leaning forward slightly, both hands on the desk, reading the chart. Claire called Brianna. My sister walked to the stand looking like she hadn't slept in a week, which she probably hadn't. She was sworn in. Her voice shook on the first question and steadied on the second. Claire asked her about my father's state of mind. Brianna described him as she had known him frustrated by his limitations after the stroke, but mentally clear, still himself, still sharp about the things that mattered to him. She described conversations she'd had with him about the bakery. She described the postcard on the refrigerator. Did your father ever express to you, in words, what he wanted to happen to the bakery? Claire asked. Yes, Brianna said. What did he say? She looked down at her hands briefly, then looked up. She didn't look at my brother. She looked at me. He said he'd already made sure it was going to the right one. He said her voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. He said Rachel will take care of what I built. She won't let anyone turn it into something else. The silence in the room was total. Judge Calloway looked at Gary Whitman. Is your client prepared to present anything that addresses the financial records? Gary's response was what Claire and I had anticipated. Your Honor, my client will be exercising his Fifth Amendment rights regarding any financial matters raised in this proceeding. The judge's expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. He looked at both tables for a long moment. In the matter of the petition to contest the last will and testament of Ronald Hargrove, he said, I find the petition to be wholly without merit, filed without credible evidentiary basis, and in the circumstances revealed by the respondent's counterfiling, filed in what this court can only characterize as bad faith. The petition is denied. The will is valid in its entirety. The bakery and all associated assets are the property of Rachel Hargrove, as executor and sole legatee. He turned a page. Regarding the countersuit, he continued, this court awards the respondent all legal fees and costs. It further awards punitive damages in the amount of $40,000 for the frivolous and malicious nature of this filing. He paused. Additionally, this court is referring the financial records submitted in this proceeding to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into criminal elder financial abuse. Given the scope of the transfers, the use of a position of trust during a period of the decedent's vulnerability, and the deliberate concealment from the estate executor. This court considers referral not only appropriate, but required. He looked at my brother directly. "Your father built something," he said quietly, "and you used his illness to take it apart. That is not a civil matter. That is a crime. This court is adjourned." The gavel came down. My brother didn't move for a moment. He sat very still, and I watched him in a way I hadn't been able to before, without anger, without the adrenaline of the fight. He looked, for the first time in my memory, like a person who had run out of road. He was charged 6 weeks later. Patrice was charged separately. Gary Whitman's firm quietly withdrew from representation of both. The civil recovery process began in parallel. The $359,000 had been partially spent the house they'd purchased, the car, the vacations, the business investments that had failed. What remained would be recovered. The estate would get back maybe 60% of what had been taken, Claire estimated. Maybe less. The rest was gone. My sister asked me once, over coffee at the bakery, after everything had been filed, whether I was angry that we couldn't get it all back. I thought about it honestly. "Yes," I said, "but less than I thought I would be." She wrapped her hands around her mug. "Dad would have hated this." "Yeah, he would have." She was quiet. Then, he also would have been furious that Derek tried to say he was confused. That bothered me more than the money. The way Derek stood up there and tried to make Dad seem like he didn't know what he was doing. "He knew exactly what he was doing," I said. "He always did." We sat with that for a while, the two of us in the back corner booth of the main location, the one my father had put in the year he opened the second shop because he wanted somewhere to sit with people he trusted. The morning rush was winding down. One of the bakers was refilling the display case. The coffee machine made its familiar sounds. The books were on my desk in the back office now. The real ones, the ones I'd pulled from storage and gone through line by line. I had found everything there was to find. I had documented all of it, organized it, preserved it, the way my father had taught me to. Numbers are honest, Rach. They don't lie. I had also found something else, tucked inside the back cover of the green ledger he'd kept since the beginning. A folded piece of paper, handwritten, dated 14 months before he died the same week he had visited Mr. Phipps. It said, "Rach, if you're reading this, you found it. You always find things. I'm leaving you the bakery, because I know you won't let the numbers get away from you, and you won't let anyone tell you the numbers don't matter. Take care of what we built, and don't let your mother's biscuit recipe disappear." She worked 3 years on that thing. Love, Dad. I had taped it to the inside of the office door, where I could read it in the morning when I came in. The bakery is still open. All 3 locations. I moved to Clarksville 6 months ago, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I still take forensic consulting work remotely on contract, but the early mornings are mine now. Flour on the counter, the smell of the oven, the steady rhythm of a place that has been here for 43 years and intends to be here for 43 more. My sister comes in on Sundays. We are careful with each other, the way you are careful with something that was broken and has been put back together, aware of where the seams are. But it's real. It's honest. And honest, my father taught me, is the most important thing a thing can be. My brother's trial is in the fall. I have been told I may be called as a witness. I am not afraid of that. I am a forensic accountant. I have sat in more difficult rooms than a courtroom, reading more complicated records than these, and I have always just told the truth about what the numbers showed. The numbers don't lie. People lie. Numbers just show you what people did. He showed me that, in this office, at this desk, when I was 14 years old, and I have never once forgotten it.